Section 3. Approaches to Motivation and Emotion. Introduction. This lecture brings into details the concept of the different approaches of motivation and emotion: the drive reduction approach, arousal approach, incentive approach, cognitive approach. Objectives. At the end of the lecture, the student should be able to 1. Explain different approaches to the source of our behavior. Content. Motivation moves people to behave, think, and feel the way they do. Motivated behavior is energized, directed, and sustained. There is no shortage of theories about why organisms are motivated to do what they do. This section explores the main approaches to motivation, beginning with the evolutionary approach, which emphasizes the biological basis of motivation. The evolutionary approach. Early in psychology's history, the evolutionary approach emphasized the role of instinct in motivation. Ethology also has described motivation from an evolutionary perspective. An instinct is an innate, unlearned, biological pattern of behavior that is assumed to be universal throughout a species. A student of Darwin's evolutionary theory, American psychologist William McDougall, 1908, argued that all behavior involves instinct. In particular, he said that we have instincts for acquisitiveness, curiosity, pugnacity, gregariousness, and self-assertion. At about the same time, Sigmund Freud, 1917, argued that behavior is based on instinct. Freud believed that sex and aggression were especially powerful instincts. It was not long before a number of psychologists had crafted Landry's list of instincts, some lists running to thousands of items. However, it soon became apparent that what the early instinct theorists were doing was naming a behavior rather than explaining it. If we say that people have an instinct for sex, for curiosity, or for acquisitiveness, we are merely naming this behavior, not explaining them. Although the approach of merely labeling behavior as instincts landed in psychology's trash heap many years ago, the idea that some motivation is unlearned is still alive and well today. It is widely accepted that instinctive behavior is common in non-human species, and in Chapter 4, you learned that human infants come into the world equipped with some unlearned instincts, such as sucking. Most attachment theorists also believe that infants have an unlearned instinct for orienting toward a caregiver. Recently, evolutionary psychology has rekindled interest in the evolutionary basis of motivation. According to evolutionary psychologists, the motivation for sex, aggression, achievement, and other behavior is rooted in our evolutionary past. Bose, 2000, 2004, Cosmides, and others, 2003. Thus, if a species is highly competitive, it is because such competitiveness improved the chance for survival and was passed down through the genes from generation to generation. Drive reduction theory. If you do not have an instinct for sex, maybe you have a drive or a need for it. A drive is an aroused state that occurs because of a psychological need. A need is a deprivation that energizes the drive to eliminate or reduce the deprivation. You might have a need for water, for food, or for sex. The body's need for food, for example, arouses your hunger drive. Hunger motivates you to do something, to go out for a hamburger, for example, to reduce the drive and satisfy the need. Drive reduction theory explains that as drive becomes stronger, we are motivated to reduce it. Usually, but not always, needs and drives are closely associated in time. For example, when your body needs food, your hunger drive will probably be aroused. An hour after you have eaten a hamburger, you might still be hungry, thus you need food, but your hunger drive might have subsided. From this example, you can sense that drive pertains to a psychological state. Need involves a psychological state. The goal of drive reduction is homeostasis, the body's tendency to maintain an equilibrium or steady state. An analogy for homeostasis is the thermostat that keeps the temperature constant in a house. For example, assume that the thermostat in your house is set at 68 degrees during the winter. The furnace heats the house to 68 degrees and then the furnace shuts off. Without a source of heat, the temperature in the house eventually falls below 68 degrees. If the outside temperature is below 68 degrees, the thermostat detects this change and turns the furnace back on again. The cycle is repeated so that the temperature is maintained within narrow limits. Today, homeostasis is used to explain both psychological and psychological imbalances. The circumstance just described, seeking stimulation and thrills, suggests that individuals seek arousal, a state of alertness or activation in their lives. Is there an optimum level of arousal that motivates behavior? Early in the 20th century, two psychologists described what optimum arousal might be. Their formulation, now known as the Yerkes-Dodson law, states that performance is best under conditions of moderation arousal than either low or high arousal. At the low end of arousal, you might be too lethargic to perform tasks well. At the high end, you may not be able to concentrate. Think about how aroused you were the last time you took a test. If your arousal was too high, your performance probably suffered. If it was too low, you may not have worked fast enough to finish the test. Also, think about performance in sports. Being too aroused usually harms athletes' performance. For example, a thumping heart and rapid breathing have accompanied many golfers, missed putts, and basketball players' failed free throw attempts. However, if athletes' arousal is too low, they may not concentrate well on the task at hand. Moderate arousal often serves us best in tackling life's tasks, but there are times when low or high arousal produces optimal performance. For well-learned or simple tasks, signing your name, pushing a button on request, optimal arousal may be quite high. In contrast, when learning a task or doing something complex, solving an algebraic equation, much lower arousal is preferred. As tasks become more difficult, the ability to be alert and attentive but relaxed is critical to optimal performance. As mentioned earlier, some people seek a great deal of stimulation in their lives and enjoy the thrill of engaging in risky behavior. Sensation seeking is the motivation to experience varied, novel, complex, and intense sensations and experiences. It also involves the willingness to take risks just for the sake of such an experience. Zuckerman and colleagues, Zuckerman 1994, 2000, Zuckerman and others 1993, have found that high sensation seekers are more likely than low sensation seekers to be motivated to engage in sports such as mountain climbing, parachuting, hand gliding, scuba diving, car and motorcycle racing, and downhill skiing. Be attracted to vocations involving exciting experiences such as firefighting, emergency room work, and air traffic control when confined to monotonous desk jobs. They report high job dissatisfaction, drink heavily, smoke, and use illicit drugs, have a short-term hedonistic attitude toward intimate relationships. High sensation seekers also tend to engage in more varied sexual activities with more partners. The cognitive approach. The contemporary view of motivation emphasizes cognitive factors. Brophy 2004, Zimmerman and Sean 2001, Sean 2004. Consider your motivation to do well in this class. Your confidence in your ability to do well and your expectation for success may help you to relax, concentrate better, and study more effectively. If you think too much about not doing well in the class and fear that you will fail, you can become too anxious and not perform as well. Your ability to consciously control your humanistic theories also stresses our ability to examine our lives and become aware of what motivates us. A. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is another important aspect of the cognitive approach to motivation. Intrinsic motivation is based on internal factors such as self-determination, curiosity, challenge, and effort. Extrinsic motivation involves external incentives such as rewards and punishments. Some students study hard because they are internally motivated to put forth considerable effort and achieve high quality in their work, intrinsic motivation. Other students study hard because they want to make good grades or avoid parental disapproval, extrinsic motivation. Some psychologists stress that many highly successful individuals are both intrinsically motivated, have a high personal standard of achievement, and emphasize personal effort, and extrinsically motivated are highly competitive. Lance Armstrong is a good example. Armstrong had an incredible amount of intrinsic motivation to come back from testicular cancer to win the Tour de France. However, the extrinsic motivation of winning the Tour de France trophy and the millions of dollars in endorsement contracts also likely played a role in his motivation. For the most part, though, psychologists believe that intrinsic motivation is the key to achievement. Lance Armstrong, like many other athletic champions, decided early on that he was training and racing for himself, not for his parents, coaches, or the medals. B. The importance of self-generated goals. Currently, there is considerable interest in studying people's self-generated goals. Eccles and Wakefield, 2002. Some examples of these goals are personal projects, life tasks, and personal strivings. Personal projects can range from trivial pursuits such as letting a bad haircut grow out to life goals, such as becoming a good parent. Life tasks are problems individuals currently are working on. They usually focus on normal life transitions such as going to college, getting married, and entering an occupation. Many college students say that their life tasks revolve around academic achievement and social concerns. Cantor and Langston, 1989. Personal strivings represent what a person is typically trying to do. For example, someone might say that she typically tries to do well in school. Summary: the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is well established in psychology. The basic idea is that we can be motivated by internal intrinsic factors such as self-generated goals or external extrinsic factors such as praise or a monetary reward. It is commonly argued that intrinsic motivation is preferable to extrinsic motivation because it leads to more positive outcomes. This is the end of section 3. Thanks for listening.